So yesterday on The Eagle is Stranded, we were talking to Ruth, aka the Beer Fairy, about the joys of beer, and she's going to send us some beer, which we'll talk about and taste it live on a forthcoming episode of The Eagle is Stranded. Yesterday we talked about the joys of drink. Today we warn of the dangers of drink, its ability to cause antisocial behaviour, as exemplified perfectly yesterday by our neighbours. It's now 1:30 in the afternoon, and this is the sound of our neighbourhood. But 12 hours ago, at 1:30 this morning, this was the sound of our neighbourhood. So a couple of neighbours, a few doors down, not exactly sure where. I don't think I've met these particular neighbours. I think there might be some people who recently moved in. Fortunately, there was just a couple of them, because I was a little bit worried. The noise they were making, which we could hear from our bedroom with the window closed, double glazed window, and it was so loud that I assumed that there was a massive party going on. And I thought, oh God, there's not a load of people in this garden, is there, who've just decided to have a massive party and flaunt the rules. But when I opened the window, it became apparent there was just two people, but they had a microphone, which seems a little bit pointless. Bearing in mind there's two people, they're sat in their garden, presumably next to each other, but they've decided that they really need amplification at 12:30 at night. And after an hour, I thought, I've got to go and record this. I'm clearly not going to get to sleep, so if I record it, there might be some entertainment value in it. So I stood in the bathroom with the window open, my arm in the air with the recorder pointed out the window, and as you can hear, it sounds like they're right there. I'm never going to dance again, she sings. I think we'd all rather you'd never sing again. And I think I got the recorder on just in time, because about a minute into recording, someone finally came out of their house to have a word about the noise.
Sorry.
And I can't hear exactly what she says because she hasn't got a microphone with her. She hadn't thought to bring her own amplification. But I think what she's essentially saying is they can hear it from streets away, and she's come to have a word because the noise keeps waking her baby up. So you now maybe think that a reasonable person would accept this and go, oh, bloody hell, I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what I was thinking. In fairness, she does apologise.
Sorry.
Which we all can hear because she shouts her apology over the microphone. And she knows the lady's very nice about it. She says, it's all right, but if you can turn it off now. And she returns back, and immediately the woman, rather than turning the music off, decides to turn the music up and dedicate the next song to the lady who's just come over to ask them to turn it down.
This one's for you. No, seriously, this one's for you.
And now it's turned up so loud that there's feedback coming from it. And I don't know if she's deliberately now putting the microphone towards the speaker to make more noise. That on top of the fact that she keeps shouting, this one's for you.
This one's for you.
And she's clearly drank so much that any sense of reasoning's gone out of the window.
I don't care. I don't know shit. I don't care. It's alright, don't care.
And now she's claiming that she doesn't know who she is, as in her neighbour. Well, I assume she means that. Unless she's having an existential crisis and she's referring to herself.
I don't care. I don't know shit. I don't care. It's alright, don't care.
I don't know where that logic comes from anyway. I don't know who she is, therefore I don't care. Well, she's clearly a neighbour. She clearly lives near where you live, and she can hear the fact that you're screaming George Michael. I'm toying with the idea of maybe, because they probably won't remember this in the morning, I'm toying with the idea of maybe posting a CD through their door. Maybe call it Now That's What I Call, and the name of our street, Volume 1. And it would be a recording of their antics And then maybe this could be track 2. Kind of like an outsider's commentary. I mean, there was another part of me that thought I could maybe, if we knew exactly where it was, we could set some speakers up outside their house. They probably wouldn't be awake at 9 o'clock in the morning, so everyone else would be awake at 9 o'clock in the morning. We can play back their performance from the night to their hungover selves in the morning. And therefore literally be giving them a taste of their own medicine. However, that would have required me staying up all night, taking the recording, putting it onto the computer, working out a speaker setup, locating that house. But I couldn't be sure which house it was, so it would kind of backfire on me if I was caught scaling a drain pipe with a set of speakers, playing the sounds of drunken singing to completely the wrong house. So I decided against that idea, but fear not, because it's time for some poetic justice now. She's obviously not bothered who this woman is, and she's not bothered that she's disrupted the sleep of an entire neighbourhood and at least one person's baby, but she's too proud to back down. So she turns the music up, shouts "This is for you," and plays deafening feedback and sings even louder. However, you know what they say about pride? It comes before a fall. And I am pleased to announce that a few seconds later, the following occurs. Let's hear that bit of poetic justice once again. I think I've fallen down. Yeah, I think you probably have. I think the entire neighbourhood had worked out that you'd fallen. I think she got there about 15 seconds after everyone else. Anyway, I'm pleased to report that the fall seemed to somewhat curtail the party. Unfortunately, I'm pleased to announce that it went relatively quiet after that. It reminded me of a time when I was antisocial. I hadn't been drinking. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was at university, and I studied creative music technology. And I think one of the modules was to produce some track or something. So it was 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't get to sleep, and I was sat there doing some compression or equalisation of a drum. And it was essentially this kick drum. So it was just this doof, doof, doof sound. But obviously I was wearing headphones because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I must have been doing it for a good 5 minutes. And I was just zooming in, I was just trying to get the sound right, and I was listening to it and I was thinking, oh, it sounds really good, it sounds really three-dimensional, this drum. And then I was thinking, I'm sure I haven't put delay on the drum, but I can hear another drum over the top. And I thought, what's going on? I can hear more drumming. So I thought, I must be getting tired because I can hear loads of drums, as if the drum sounds are duplicated. So I stopped the playback and I realised that the drums were still continuing. I could still hear the banging, and I realised that it was someone at the door, drumming on the door. And I was thinking, at this time in the morning, there must be like an emergency or something. So I rushed to the door and opened it. I was living in a block of flats, and a couple of my neighbours were stood at the door. For the last 10 minutes, all we've been hearing from your room is boo, 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 boo. I said, I think you must be mistaken. I said, it's nothing to do with me. I said, I did hear some banging actually, but I assumed it was you lot banging on the door. We've been stood outside the door, we can hear the bloody bang, bang, bang. I said, I don't know what it was, I can't hear anything. And I think they were a bit taken aback by the fact that I was clearly denying this. And they're incredulous at the fact that I'm incredulous. I shut the door, and I'm sort of sat there and I think, oh, don't know what that was all about. That was a bit weird. I might as well finish up now and go to bed. So I go to shut the computer down, and as soon as I press the space bar, it starts playing again. And I'm thrown across the other side of the room by this deafening noise. Boom, boom, boom. And it's so loud that I run out of the room. And I'm now stood at the door. And I now know that I had obviously not turned my speakers off. And I hadn't realised. I assumed I'd turned the speakers off. I'd put the headphones on. And I thought, well, I've got headphones on. But obviously I'd forgotten to turn the speakers off. So that's all my neighbours had heard for the last 10 minutes was coming from my room, was the sound of this kick drum. Really loud. And I was obviously there going, oh, sounds pretty three-dimensional, this. I'm really impressed by what I've done. You know, I'm going to get good marks for this. And the reason it was three-dimensional is because the sound wasn't just coming from my headphones, it was coming from the speakers. I've got to stop this noise. So I think I've got to put something over my head to block out the noise, because it's just so loud. So I found a coat and there's a blanket hanging up somewhere, and I drape it over my head, and I open the door, And just as I open the door to turn the music off, a neighbour is drumming on the door. And I think, oh, bloody hell. And I come to the door with my coat and a blanket wrapped around my face, like I fashioned some weird balaclava, which I imagine was quite a shocking thing to suddenly see. This sound's coming from my room, and I advance into the room with this sound, like war drums. So I run towards my computer, press the spacebar, and the noise stops. And it's that thing when you're in that moment, and you think, right, now I've got to explain myself. But it's difficult to I always find, to summarise what you want to say in just a few quick words. What I should have said was, I do apologise. I was EQing a drum sound. I thought I had headphones on. When you came to the door, I didn't know what you were talking about. When you left, I then pressed play on the thing and got a massive shock when I realised it was coming from the speakers. But the sound was so loud and so much of a shock that rather than turn it off, I just ran out of the room. And that's why I went on for another minute. I then needed to get it back into the room to turn it off, but it was just too loud. I couldn't. So I decided to fashion some hearing protection apparatus, which is why I've got this blanket and this coat wrapped around my head. But that's quite a long thing to say. So my summation of the situation was to press the space bar, the sound stopped, and I just turned towards her and went, yeah, sorry, you're right, it was me. And she was clearly massively shocked by the scenario. And she was like, well, don't do it again. And she left. And there was no explanation. Anyway, my advice to that lady, we're all in this together, and there's a lot of people who are stressed, and we all resort to different things to get us through it. Some people unwind with alcohol, and maybe it goes a little bit too far. Might I recommend reviewing your lifestyle choices? And rather than getting really drunk and going in your garden at 1:30 in the morning and shouting George Michael songs down a microphone, how's this for an idea? I can heartily recommend it as a tonic to get you through the uncertainty of this situation that we're all facing. Maybe about 10 o'clock, sit yourself down with a nice herbal tea, preferably one that doesn't have caffeine in it. That'll help you sleep. Maybe something soothing like fennel, something with licorice in it. Sit yourself down and enjoy a bit of Paul Temple, the classic BBC radio detective series from 1938 to 1968. There's a wealth of Paul Temple series to get you through. And sometimes you'll do something a bit reckless, like we did last night, me and my fiancée Ellie. But what the hell, it was a Good Friday, it's a bank holiday, and we just felt a little bit giddy, and we listened to 2 episodes of Paul Temple, a double header, an hour. We only had the one herbal tea. We was talk of having another herbal tea, but we thought, steady on. I mean, I say that, next week, I'm meant to be getting a load of beer being delivered, so to be honest, it might be me next week, in the garden. Anyway, we'll close with that lovely sound, that therapeutic sound of a drunken, selfish, headstrong woman being brought to justice by those 2 little reprobates, gravity and motion. Until tomorrow, goodbye.
I think I fell down.